How to Make Chocolate Chip Cookies by Lauren Pozarkowitz. This is going to be a step-by-step presentation about how to make chocolate chip cookies. First, I'm going to tell you about the ingredients that we need to have while making our chocolate chip cookies. Our first ingredients are all-purpose flour, which you need 2 1/4 cup of. Then you need 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon salt, 1 cup softened butter, and 3/4 cup brown sugar. The next ingredients that you need is a 3/4 cup of granulated sugar, 1 teaspoon vanilla, and 2 large eggs. You also need 2 cups of chocolate chips. Step 1. You're going to get a medium-sized bowl to combine your 2 1/4 cup of flour and your 1 teaspoon baking soda and your 1 teaspoon salt. Then you can just use your little spoon to mix it in so that it's fully blended together. Then you can set that bowl off to the side and grab another bowl. With this bowl, you're going to use it to combine your wet ingredients. These combine are 1 cup softened butter, which is 2 sticks. I like to use unsalted butter because my mom always taught me that that was the best for baking. You also have 3/4 cup granulated sugar, 3/4 cup brown sugar, 1 teaspoon vanilla, and 2 large eggs. Next, you grab a mixer, an electric mixer, or a large spoon to mix the wet ingredients together. Now you have 2 bowls, 1 dry ingredients and 1 wet ingredients. Next, you're going to slowly pour the flour and the baking soda and the salt into the bowl with your wet ingredients, and you're going to use your large spoon or your electric mixer to mix it together. You don't want to pour too much at a time because it will explode with flour everywhere. I have done that so many times in my kitchen and it makes a huge big mess. So it's much easier if you just pour it slowly in together, and it also just mixes so much more nicely and your batter becomes nice and fluffy and light and your cookies turn out really, really good. Next, you're going to take your 2 cups of chocolate chips and you're going to pour them into your batter, and it's a lot easier to use a wooden spoon than an electric mixer to put the chocolate chips together with your batter. Sometimes it can just mix up the electric mixer and make it a little funky, so it's much easier to just use a wooden spoon to mix the chocolate chips into your batter. Step 5. Make sure that you preheat the oven either before or during your cooking of your chocolate chip cookies. I know personally my oven takes a little bit to preheat, so you want to make sure that you preheat that to 350 degrees, and then you're going to take either 1 or 2 sheets of baking pans and you're going to line them with wax paper or baking sheets. This helps just from keeping the cookies unstuck from the bottom of the pan, and also it helps them to not burn on the bottom. This is a trick that I learned a few years ago while I was making cookies, and I found it to be such a lifesaver, especially when cleaning up after baking. I also like to use an ice cream scooper when I make my cookie dough balls, just because it keeps them all a uniform size, same shape, and it just makes an even consistency while you're baking them, and you don't have to adjust the time depending on how large your cookie size is. Because sometimes if you have a larger cookie, you need to add more time onto the oven for those cookies to bake evenly through. So also when you're lining the cookies on the pan, you want to make sure that you line them with enough space and room because they are going to expand in the oven. So you want to make sure that your cookies are not too close together on the pan, or else they are going to overlap on each other and you're just going to have more of a cookie cake than individual cookies. But those are still good too, and I have definitely made those before, and I just use my spatula to cut them up into little individual squares more than circular cookies. So on step 6, you're going to let the cookies bake in the oven for 9 to 11 minutes. Just kind of depends on your cookie size, excuse me. If you have a larger cookie, like I said, you're going to have to let it bake for a little bit longer. But if your cookies are a more smaller and consistent size, then you can go ahead and do less time. I like to do less time because then it lets them be a little more gooier, and they also cook on the pan when you pull them out of the oven and you let them sit on there for a little bit. So if they're just a little bit done and you think they need just maybe a minute or two, maybe just pull them out for a minute, see if they cook a little bit more. If not, just plop them back in the oven for another minute, and that usually can take care of that pretty quickly. Watch the cookies as they're getting close to being done in the oven. A good way to check if your cookies are done is to see if the edges around the cookies are golden brown. That's a good way to know if your cookies are done. Then you're going to let the cookies cool on the baking sheet, like I said, after you pull them out of the oven. This lets them cook for a minute or two longer. And then you're going to use a spatula to move them to a cooling rack. Lastly, grab some milk and enjoy your cookies. Some extra tips that I listed were I like to pour a little extra vanilla in my cookies. Like I'll do 2 teaspoons instead of vanilla. This recipe that I used was from Nestle Toll House, but me and my roommates, whenever we make chocolate chip cookies, we love vanilla. So we pour a little bit extra in there and it kind of just makes them a little bit sweeter. Like I said, I like to use unsoftened butter just because it helps a lot with baking and it makes an even consistency with the batter. Make sure that you don't mix your batter too much because it'll make it a little too runny. I've definitely had some runny cookies before, and I like my cookies to be thick and fluffy. So I've noticed that when I just make sure that I don't mix the cookies too much, then it just kind of adds for a thicker, fluffier cookie. Some other tips that I have are the wax paper. The wax paper is a huge, big, important tip. It helps your cookies from not burning on the bottom. It also helps with cleanup. I like to personally clean up as I cook because then it doesn't look like such a tornado in my kitchen after I'm done cooking. That is something that my parents have always taught me, so that is something that I definitely suggest. And it just kind of adds for a better cooking experience. Then you don't feel like you're stuck with such a big cleanup afterwards. Lastly, I love milk with my cookies. That's my favorite thing to do is milk and cookies and watch a movie. I also like to make a cookie sundae with ice cream and then a cookie on top and then chocolate syrup. And if I have a maraschino cherry, those are my favorites. So I like to put that on top as well. So I hope you guys enjoy these extra tips that I have for you guys and that you would love to add them to your recipe because